Oh, how's it going, man?
What's going on, buddy?
Oh, nothing much.
Hang out. All right, guys. So, my name is Jake Ike. I am here with Joseph Murphy.
Hey.
This will be episode 1 of the mini podcast series that I am going to be doing.
The very first one.
Very first. The reasoning behind this is I want to share my story and everything that I learned with the journey that I took the past year and a half or so. For those of you that don't know me at all or just haven't seen any of my social media posts about it, I went from being a collegiate level basketball and lacrosse player, never having wrestled a day in my life. I started wrestling my junior year, the beginning of my junior year, September 2017 to be exact, and then ended up trying out for the Cortland State wrestling team, which is a Division III team, and the end of August was the first day of practice. So roughly 10, 11 months from never having wrestled to trying out for the wrestling team, ended up making the team, ended up competing with them this past season, and I just wanted to share everything that I learned in hopes that people can take lessons from this or take whatever they really want to out of what we're going to be talking about over these episodes and this episode.
Yeah.
And
some of the things you practice, some
Exactly.
of the things you've learned, from the successes and the failures.
Yes. Oh my.
All of them.
Mhm.
All of them. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today, what I'm going to be talking about with Joe, his expertise will be, we're going to be talking about yoga, meditation, breathing, just about all things recovery.
Yeah. Focusing a lot on recovery.
Yeah.
We're really going to talk a bit about the parasympathetic nervous system, everything that's trying to calm you down, but also in a way prepare you mentally for competition too. So there's a lot of shit to go over today. I'm going to probably edit that one out. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Hopefully you can take something from it.
Yeah.
I'm still a young teacher. There's still tons of stuff to learn, but I'm happy to be here to share it.
Yep. And I'm just going to be sharing throughout the conversation just how I used these resources and tools to help me not only learn as fast as I can, but how to perform to the best of my ability before and during the season and now after as well.
Yeah.
So really quick, Joe, where are we? Where are we right now?
So
in this
we are
nice
at
setting?
Mindful Yoga. This is where I teach. This is a somewhat new studio. It's located in Fayetteville, New York, right outside of Syracuse. It started about a year and a half ago now. I believe it was last January. So yeah, a little bit less than a year and a half. This was started by a very close friend of mine and boss, Heather, and she's been teaching for a long time, and it's been going really well. We have a ton of community support. I have a lot of creative freedom as a teacher, and Jake was really nice in introducing me as an expert to yoga, but when I sit among the staff here, I feel very much in a community of people that are just as good as I am. We just have our different, our own skills and our own things we're particularly good at. So, but yeah, that's where we are. And all this decoration, all these beautiful things around, I can't take claim for this. This was somebody else with far better taste than I
It's
had.
absolutely. No, it's a beautiful studio.
It's very nice.
It's very quaint. Like it's very relaxing to be in.
She nailed it. She did a great job
Yeah.
with the design here. So I can't thank her enough for giving me this opportunity to teach here.
Absolutely.
It's amazing the type, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more later on. It's amazing the changes you can see in even a year's time. When we recently had our 1-year anniversary at the studio, and we taught a class where we invited everyone in. It was a free class, and we really tried to show all the growth that has occurred. And I was thinking about it because we had a similar class when we first started the studio.
Yep.
And it was amazing to me I was just laughing about how bad I was when I first started. Like, looking back, I had one class, I taught one sequence of moves,
Yeah.
that was it. And now I look back, I had like notes upon notes upon notes of how to properly lead a sequence of asana. And now I everything's mental, and I'm just able to drop in mentally into meditation when I even teach now.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing to think back, and I can't help but be hopeful for the future. Is if I made that amount of progress in 1 year, what can happen over 5, over
Exactly.
10, over 15? And that's where we get these masters of different disciplines. You're talking about combat sports and wrestling. There are people that are still teaching, still wrestling well into their 50s and 60s, and while they might lose some of their strength, just to imagine what's going on mentally during all of that is really mind blowing. So
Yeah, no, for sure.
very
And
cool stuff.
for those watching, I took classes with Joe before he started formally teaching at Mindful Yoga. Right when he started teaching yoga, I believe I was in one of his first, if not the first, class
Yes.
that he held here, or taught rather. And I just recently took a class about a week and a half ago, so it was about a year, maybe a little bit, some change, time frame to where I had never taken Joe's class until then. And I just, like, the change that was made with your practice, not only with the moves that you were showing, but more so the way that you were interjecting with your students, and
No,
the way
thank you.
that you were
Thank
transitioning from pose to pose, and the vocabulary that you were using. Your speech was fantastic. Your public speaking skills were phenomenal.
thank you,
There were
thank you.
there were no like ums or
Yeah,
anything like that. It was very fluid, very relaxing. Obviously, I could tell you knew what you were talking about, and it was
I try.
it was very, very incredible to see the change that you made from in just a year's time.
Yeah, well, thank
so I
you,
want to
man.
commend you for
Yeah.
that, because that was very, very cool.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible growth journey, and before I started teaching, I taught sort of classes, very small snippets of classes in a program that Jake and I started. We ran at JD High School, a local high school near us. Strength and conditioning program. We were working with high school athletes to help prep them for college sports if they were interested in that. Help them become just more overall, beyond just athletics, just become more sound physically. We see a lot of imbalances physically, definitely a lot of issues with confidence and psychological health. So we really tried to work in with that as well. And we began to see early on that a lot of these students we were working with were very inflexible, not to the point, not even to just the point of limiting their performance, but also that was a bit frightening as far as long-term health consequences. They were developing poor posture early on. They had an inability to stabilize their joints, hips and knees during movement, especially athletic movement. And you're talking about athletes that are doing high-demand sports. And so we began, one of the first things we instituted was a 20-minute yoga session at the beginning of every practice, at the beginning of every training session we did. And it's always the funniest thing to me. It's exactly how I came to yoga when I first heard of it. This must have been my sophomore year of high school. I must have been around 15 at the time. It was very hot outside, and my trainer said, "It's a little too hot to do our running drills as we normally would. I'm going to lead you through a yoga practice." And I remember scoffing a little bit, thinking, yoga? Like, really?
That's the common misconception that a lot of people had. Even I had it. It was, oh my gosh, yoga is like, that's stupid. Let's go lift weights.
Yeah, a lot of people have that thought, and I did too. The other thing I was thinking, and again, we'll dive into this later, is I never really had the appreciation for what separated yoga from stretching. And so at the time, I knew that stretching was important. That's something that a lot of people know. We all don't do it as much as we should. Even me as a yoga instructor, I don't stretch as often as I should. But at the time, I was thinking, why don't I just stretch? What's the real thing here? Well, and that class kicked my butt. And I just remember sitting on the mat afterwards, my eyes closed. I had never meditated before, and because of the physical exhaustion, the heat, just everything around that scenario, and I was able to finally reach mental silence for, honestly, the first time in my life. I mean, I was 15 years old. 14, 15, 16-year-old boys and girls have a lot of stuff moving around in their heads. And I remember just sitting there going, holy cow, this is mind-blowing. And then I stood up, and my body, my legs, my arms, my posture was better than it ever had been before. And from then on, I was sold. You didn't have to tell me to look more into this. I was driven to find it myself. And that's what we found with the high school students as well, is that a lot of them were all very receptive. I have to give them credit. They were all very open to trying new things, and they were excited to try new exercises, try new yoga routines. But when we started doing yoga, we saw that there was a little uncomfortableness with the new thing, with doing yoga for oftentimes the first time.
It was hard for them to really try and relax and dive into
yeah.
the routine that we were going through.
Exactly.
So I don't want to say it was pointless, because it wasn't pointless. They were definitely stretching what we wanted them to stretch, but if you can get that stretching part down, but also the mindfulness part down, to where you can truly kind of melt into what you're doing and flow through it with fluidity, then you really, really get the benefits of that.
That's where the magic comes from.
Yeah.
And we noticed over time that our students began to ask us, hey, can we do yoga today? Mm-hmm. And that's a response I never expected.
Yeah.
I expected some of them to respect yoga, as in see the benefits of it, but I didn't expect these kids to ask, hey, can we do yoga today? Are we going to do yoga today? And I mean, that made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But it was really cool to see how quickly something like this can take hold. It's a very powerful experience. So yeah, I mean, that's my basic history of, I mean, we kind of segued right from the studio to talking about my history with yoga, but... well, I
was going to ask you, so you really discovered yoga for the first time when you were a sophomore in high school. And then...
Yes, that was the first true practice I did.
Yeah, so from then, did you practice it regularly throughout high school and then into college? Because I know that you were recruited to play D3 football at Brockport, and you ended up doing that for a year. I also know that you had a knee injury, if you want to share a little bit about that, and how you went from that and used yoga to transition into recovering.
Absolutely, yoga, without a doubt, was, over time, grew to be a huge part of my athletic context here, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. After I took that first class, it was a while before I practiced again. And yoga, and I can say this as a teacher, I can say this watching my new students coming in, and I can say this from my own experience. The first yoga class you take is oftentimes a bit miserable. Mm-hmm. It's oftentimes very hard. You're getting into positions that are really uncomfortable, and as I often say, jokingly to my students, you probably didn't even know this muscle existed, right? I'll get them into a position where we're stretching a certain way, and I can feel the energy of the room, where the basic energy is, oh, Jesus. Yeah. And they have never done that before.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And so the first class, I mean, it kicked my butt, and I loved it and I enjoyed it, but it took a while for me to integrate it into my training. Mm-hmm. But then, as I was going through high school, I was a fairly good athlete. I was an aggressive kid. I had a lot of anger to get out, and I found a lot of enjoyment in football. That was my main sport. I still love it to this day, though. I had a bit of a sore ending to my career, but throughout high school, I was playing very well. I was starting to really get the flow of the sport. And then my junior year, prior to the season, I had an ACL tear in a preseason camp. Mm-hmm. I tore a complete tear of my ACL, and I tore a partial tear of my medial meniscus and my lateral meniscus. There were actually two separate tears of my medial meniscus, and that will become important later on. I was very lucky to have an excellent surgeon, Dr. Smart from SOS, and he performed, not only did he perform about the cleanest surgery I've ever seen in my life, I mean, you should see the scars. I mean, I know I've shown them to you. They're so minimal. Mm-hmm. The recovery was so quick. Yep. It was really incredible. But one of the issues, and this is something that not many people know about knee injuries, is the ACL rarely tears by itself. It almost always tears in conjunction with something else. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up tearing, my medial and lateral meniscus. Mm-hmm. Well, the meniscus, consisting of those two basic parts, the lateral meniscus receives a lot of blood flow. So when you have injuries to that area, it can typically recover very effectively. Mm-hmm. The medial does not. Yep. And so I recovered very quickly. I had an excellent recovery with my ACL and my knee in general. But then getting back into sports, I was having a lot of issues with swelling and stability even though my recovery was excellent, and it turns out I still had a tear in my medial meniscus. So had to go in a second time to cut that out. So I had 2 surgeries on my knee over the span of about 4 months. Yep. During recovery, recovery from any lower body injury is extremely difficult because nobody wants to be wheelchair bound for a long time, and it's not good to be wheelchair bound if you can avoid it.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't want to let our muscles atrophy. Yep. One of the issues, though, is you're then on your feet all day, and you're putting pressure on things that are still healing. And one of the greatest limiters in recovery from a knee injury, especially, is when you hurt your knee, your body compensates by tightening everything up around it.
Yeah.
Your hamstring tendons, they lock up. Your quads, they lock up. Your calves, they lock up to stabilize that joint as much as possible.
Yeah.
That makes it hard, though, because when we're trying to go through our rehab, we have to make sure that we are getting a full activation, getting that activation, relaxation,
Yep.
switching there within our muscles, and that doesn't occur when you're getting spasmic.
Yeah.
So we were lucky. The trainer that I've worked with for a long time, that Jake has worked with for a long time too, he's
Yep.
a massage therapist, and helped me make sure that my hamstrings were releasing, relaxing, before, during, and after workouts. I mean, I'd have bruises all the way up my legs. But the big thing that helped me with recovery and eventually getting back into athletics was yoga.
Yeah.
The ability for yoga to combine the benefits we know of in stretching, that we can demonstrate in research now, of increased blood flow, of obviously lengthening of the range of motion, and even we can also demonstrate how in some activities we can get an imbalance in tension that's applied to the tendon versus the muscle belly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yoga does a great job of help evening that out. It's an incredible activity, but beyond that, you're in a lot of pain a lot of the time, and the quicker you can get off pain medication, the better. The pain medication, as necessary as it can be early on, can hinder recovery. We know that. So I tried to do that, but that meant I was in excruciating pain a lot of the time. And that is when I really started to develop the mental aspect of yoga.
Yep.
I really started to develop the meditation, the breathing, that calmed my mind down, allowed me to deal with the pain, to move on from the psychological aspects of injury as well.
Yep.
When moving on a bit, I had a great recovery overall. And I went through all of winter and spring track and field. Probably shouldn't have done winter track and field. It was a little early for sure.
Sometimes you gotta live a little.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
But I went through all through that, all through the summer, and I remember, this is something I never would have realized, and I have a lot more respect for athletes that do have serious injuries after I experienced it myself. When I got into my first tackle football drill, it was in double sessions. The first time I had my helmet, my shoulder pads, my leg pads on again, I was shaking. My hands were shaking, and I was a senior at this point. I was fully prepared. I was a captain on the team. I was a leader, and I was so frightened. My hands were shaking. And I was like, you can't step out. You can't quit.
Yeah.
You have the ball, and the play that the coach called is you carrying the ball and there's no avoiding this.
No.
And there's no not getting tackled. There's no not rolling. There's no way to avoid this. And I just remember saying, whatever happens, happens. And I was so nervous. I get hit, I get tackled, and immediately switch went off and I was fine.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I got hit.
Yep.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
And immediately the tempo changed, the emotion changed inside my head, and I was an athlete again. And the psychological aspect of injury is something that is really hasn't been studied a ton. Or let me rephrase that. It has been, but it hasn't been properly conveyed to a lot of athletes.
Yes. And not in a very applicable way, if you will, because there's not a lot of really in-depth examples when it comes to dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Not only injury, but just fear as an athlete in general when you're going into competition. Because I know that when I was both learning how to wrestle, and then when I got into the season in tryouts and starting to roll around with the team a little bit, and then eventually moving into competition, I had a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
And part of me didn't know how to deal with it. It got so bad sometimes to the point where I couldn't feel my face or my hands.
Yep.
And I was literally about to step out onto the mat to wrestle.
Yeah.
And I had never competed before, at least in an individual sport. So it was not only wrestling, trying to do an individual sport, but a combat sport as well.
Yes.
In such a short amount of time. And
you have those physical fears, but also the social acceptance fears as well.
Exactly.
You're new to this.
Yep. So one of the ways that I helped me deal with it was the breathing aspect and the meditation aspect. Working on those different exercises. We'll go over a few, but 1-4-2 is a great one that I know you practiced with a little bit. But I personally, when I was going to go compete, I used box breathing.
That's one of my favorites.
For those who don't know, it's 4 sides to a box. So you inhale for, let's say, 7 seconds, you hold for 7 seconds, you exhale for 7, and then you hold that exhale for 7 seconds, and then you immediately repeat. You don't have to do more than 4 or 5 sets of that.
Before you even just begin to feel that relaxation.
Yeah, exactly. And I would do that directly before my match. Literally, I'm bouncing around my headgear, and I would stop, do the breathing, and I noticed immediately I could feel the endorphins. I could feel myself calming down, switching from that sympathetic to parasympathetic, respectively, because when you're about to go wrestle, you want to be in that fight or flight state a little bit.
Yeah, you need a little bit of a heightened state of arousal.
Yeah,
you need a little bit of that.
Yep. And I also would use meditation, not only leading up to it to calm myself down mentally and psychologically, but as a form of recovery. So using it to almost not, I don't want to say replace sleep, but as a form of sleep.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of the time we're college athletes, it's hard to get adequate amount of rest. So before practice, I would oftentimes, I would try to do it almost every day. So I'm not perfect. Sometimes I wouldn't do it every day. It's all right. We're all human. But for at least 20 minutes, I would do a lying meditation. So I'd be on my back with some relaxing music, set the timer for 20 minutes, focus on my breathing, and to try to drop into that deep relaxative state. And then when I would come out of it, I would feel very refreshed, like I had just taken a 2-hour nap. Sometimes I would come out of it 5 minutes early thinking that 3 hours had just passed by.
Yeah.
Which is, in retrospect, phenomenal because it just feels like I got that much more rest.
Right.
And I'm feeling ready to go for practice, and I'm not as anxious because when I was working into first practicing, especially in the first part of the year, first few weeks, first few months even going into practice, I was anxious. I was afraid because these guys, like, they were all fantastic. All my teammates were incredible people and willing to help, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm going in there with very limited skill, barely proficient at the sport of wrestling at the start of the year, and going in to try to compete with these guys and practice with them.
Wrestling is a sport that most people start when they're young,
Yeah.
like 5, 6, 7 years old.
Mhm.
So you're coming in
Yeah.
when these guys you're wrestling with, your teammates, have sometimes 15 years of experience prior. That's a huge change.
Yeah, and it's one thing to see that from a technique aspect. So they have 15 years of technique, that's one thing. But then they also have that much time of learning how to deal with the psychological factors.
The comfort on the mat.
They can deal with it. Their turnaround time didn't have to be as long. I had to try and figure it out as fast as I could and use every resource at my disposal to try and calm myself down so I could at least try and perform to the best of my ability with the skills that I had.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to dive a bit more into what you were talking about with meditation and breathing.
Yeah.
When we talk about meditation and breathing, and specifically, I would like to mention the thing you talked about with sleep.
Yeah.
When we look at yoga, the yoga is a practice that goes back thousands of years, and we have one of the things I always say in my classes is the earliest form of yoga did not include downward facing dog. Mm-hmm. It did not include warrior series.
Yep.
All of the earliest yoga consisted of a handful of postures, what is known as asana. When you talk, just a little vocabulary here, when you talk about the actual series of movements, that's known as asana, postures. But moving on from that, the whole point of yoga, as it's been dictated in the earliest scriptures that we can see, was postures that helped you relax your body so that you can then meditate afterward.
Yeah.
It was a means to an end. Yoga was a means to an end, as in there was the goal, and the goal was always meditation for mental clarity and stillness. And asana, the whole purpose of posture, was to help aid the body into that meditation.
Yeah.
In that way, it's very similar to Tai Chi. So when we look at yoga, we can divide it very loosely into 3 basic categories, and these are what I typically follow. We have our meditation, we have which can be defined with, there's many different vocabulary words. It's an ancient language, it's Sanskrit, so there's many different words that we can use, but typically the three ones you'll see are pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana. They each refer to slightly different forms of meditation. I won't dive too much into those.
Yep.
And then the posture, of course, that we always do that in is shavasana. But we can divide it into meditation, yoga into meditation, breathing, which is known as pranayama, and asana, or the actual postures themselves. So talking about the sleep thing is something that I found very interesting. There's an old form of yoga known as yoga nidra, and it's yoga and meditation as a practice paired together with the sole intention of replacing sleep.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that isn't very well known is that we all know that sleep, it consists of sleep cycles. We have, as we move through our sleep, and I have to re-educate myself on this, I'm a little rusty, but as we move through our sleep, we have these cycles that we go through where we're in a light sleep, and then we'll drop into a REM sleep where there's a lot of mental activity, but very little body activity. We'll get some eye fluttering, but that's where we get our brain is in that state where it's really having a free-form art show. It's dreaming, it's thinking, forming new neurological pathways. Thank you. And then afterward, you work into a deep sleep, and that's where most of the physical reparations occur, where you're recovering from physical stress, from muscle tearing, from exercise and such. And you'll flow through repeatedly, these different sleep cycles. When we're able to look at this now with brain scans, and see track when people flow through these cycles, and at each of these defined stages, we can determine that the brain is running at a certain frequency. And so we can categorize these into different names. And so when we're walking through our daily lives, that's beta waves. And so those are like, you're driving, you're making that left turn. Oh, that guy just cut me off. Gonna put on my blinker, turn. I gotta go to the grocery store. You know, that running thought that we've got. Below that, the next level down is alpha waves, and that's where we've hit a state of relaxation. That's where, if you've ever been in the shower and then you're just standing there for a while and you're like, I can't tell you how long I've been in that shower, you kind of lose track of where you are. You
drop into the moment and you lose track
Dropping
of time.
into the moment is actually a really good way to put that. And what you were talking about there with your breathing, when we do our breathing to relax ourselves and activate that parasympathetic hormone, or the parasympathetic nervous system, we're mostly dropping into alpha waves. Below that, we have our delta waves. And so that's where we get a lot of the deep sleep. And that's where the brain is at its lowest frequency. It has very little activity, respectively. And that's where most of our extreme deep sleep occurs. And that's when you get woken up and it takes you a million years to wake up and reach mental clarity again. That's because you've been interrupted in the middle of delta waves, and your body is not used to that. It's not ready for that. And then when we're talking about REM sleep, there's still a lot we need to know about REM sleep. But REM sleep is a combination of a balance. Consider it a proprietary blend of brain waves that are occurring at the time, including theta waves, which I won't talk about much because I'm not qualified enough to talk about them. But anyway, so basically what I'm getting at here, rambling as I often do in class, if you ever take any of my classes, you'll hear that. When we meditate, when we do our breathing, when we reach that state of relaxation, we can mimic some of the brainwave activity of sleep, and that's how you can actually get through yoga and through meditation a restfulness, recovery aspect of it in a very short amount of time.
Well, I wanted to point out, because during your practices, you almost split it into two different parts. You have the active meditation, which is the yoga practice itself, and then you have the almost passive meditation, where at the end of the practice we're trying to really absorb what we just did and feel everything. So active, I'll put it as that term. That's basically when we're moving through the practice, just mindful of what we're doing, mindful of the breathing, and Joe does a really good job of pointing that out and pulling people back into the moment of what they're actually doing, making sure that their mind doesn't really wander.
Okay, so we hit the timer on my camera. So this is the start of part two of our video. So continuing on with where we left off, talking about moving meditation, and I'll keep this brief, but we focus on one of the keys to a moving meditation is that moving part, is the actual physical movement. And so typically you have an attentional focus on something repetitive or something truly immersive physically. So the classic example of a moving meditation is Tai Chi. And we have these set series, these set movements. In yoga, a good example is something known as Ashtanga yoga. It's a style I don't teach, I have a ton of respect for, but it's these set series that are consistent every single time. So you go and you'll take the same class over and over, and the teacher really doesn't do a ton of direction from the front of the class. They're walking around, providing assisting in postures, providing adjustments. It's a very technically sound and technically difficult class, but that repetition, having an immersive physical tie, is something that is key to a moving meditation. So was there anything that you found in your warm-ups for wrestling or any of your other activities that worked into that moving meditation element? Any repetitive warm-ups maybe?
Yeah, I went through the same general warm-up. We would do the team warm-up, and that's where I would really start my moving meditation. We would be flowing through just light shadow wrestling,
every day,
just going through, like starting to get into our shots, starting to kind of move the other guy around a little bit, and then that's where I would really try to focus on my breathing, really drop into what I'm doing in preparation for the matches that were to come throughout the day.
Yeah.
And then right before the match, I would just do some light jumping, and then stop my light jumping, and then immediately take probably like 3 to 5 deep breaths, trying to just drop back into that flow state almost.
Yeah.
And just go from there in that relaxative state.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to go over, in your practices, and from what we've done just outside of your classes as well, we always go through different activations during your routine.
Yes.
And I was hoping that you could kind of elaborate a little bit, because when I was preparing and in season, sometimes just due to wear and tear of practices, I would notice that things were either really, really tight, or things might not be firing the way that they should be.
Yeah.
One common one was the glute medius and the piriformis. I noticed weren't firing the way that they really should be. And then I would go through some of the yoga routines that you showed me, and some of the poses that you showed me that I knew would activate those two muscles. So, for example, Warrior 3 was a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's a really good ankle knee stabilizer, and then it's really good at firing your glutes. And then I would maybe go into Half Moon and then some other poses through there. But I was hoping that you could kind of just give people a breakdown of what that looks like, just for how maybe everyday individuals can take that, and how you go through that in your classes, just using different poses to activate different muscle groups that might not be firing properly on different people.
Absolutely, yeah. So what you're talking about there is really the benefit, what the true essence of asana, of posture. And this is one of my main arguments beyond the mental and psychological aspects of yoga, that really, I think, makes the argument that yoga is in every single way better and more applicable than just general stretching. That's a really good point, and that's something, I'm glad you enjoyed the balance I strike there. I really work hard to make sure that there's a good balance between lengthening, relaxation, and activation in my practices. So one of the things that I always keep in my mind, I get that might be a good way to approach this, is how my thought process is in building a class. One of the things to keep in mind is that we can imagine stretching in the passive sense. So let's say you're laying on your back and you just pull your knees into your chest. Nothing is activating there, save for maybe your biceps pulling your knees in. You're getting a passive lengthening through your posterior chain, your glutes, your hammies, your lower back. You're getting a passive lengthening. By doing so, you're getting a stretching of the muscle belly, a lengthening of the tendons, and overall, you're going to cause some relaxation to seep into those muscles, for a lack of a scientific term there. And so that we can put under the category, the general element of lengthening. And then on the other side, we have activation. And so that is, if you were to compare that to like a back squat, that's activation. Of course, you're lengthening muscles during that time, but you're activating those muscles. They're under tension.
Yeah, you have that force production.
Yeah, you have a force production, right. And so one of the things to keep in mind, and this is for those of you that are fitness directed, one of the things that we'll often hear is don't do, what is it, isometric stretching or versus dynamic
Dynamic and static stretching.
Static stretching,
Yeah.
thank you.
Static stretching, yeah.
Don't do static stretching before you work out, before you do competition. And the reason for that is exactly what I was describing there. You're lengthening those muscles, but also activating the parasympathetic nervous system for that muscle tissue, for that nerve complex. And so that muscle afterward will not necessarily fire as well. So what I always try to do in my classes, because I want people to, when they do yoga, to not walk out like they just ran through like a heated press and are jelly-legged and unable to move. Because I know a lot of these people that come to my classes are leaving class and they're doing chores around the house, and they might be lifting boxes, they might be taking their dog for a walk. A lot of times they're going to games and walking upstairs. And I'm blessed with a very active group of people that come to my classes. So because of that, I don't want them to be incapable of doing activity, because if they can't activate their muscles properly, lifting a heavy box, moving, even picking up groceries and walking upstairs, they're going to be imbalanced. They're not going to be activating properly. So I consider it my responsibility to make sure that we have this alternation between the lengthening and relaxation and the activation, so that they leave class fully balanced and coordinated for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
It's the same, to finish my thought here, it's the same justification for PNF rehab and PNF stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation.
Yep.
Anyone who's ever done that before, one of the easiest examples is when you have someone laying on their back, and you have a trainer or a fellow player picking up their leg, and then you have them do a static stretch on their hamstring, just getting some length there by lifting that leg up.
Yep.
And then you have them hold that foot as the person on their back begins to press down to activate that hamstring and that glute. You have them activate, and then you stretch once again. It's that basis is the thing, the overall concept that I apply to my classes, and I find it has been very effective. People have said that they come to my classes and they feel really like they stretched everything, and that's like the biggest compliment they can give me, for sure.
Well, yeah, that's what you're trying to accomplish, because some of these individuals, although they may be fit, have never really kind of delved into what's firing and what's not, and then really trying to focus on what kind of muscles innervate with what when they're doing everyday activities, and then going through that. And
right. It's my responsibility to be the expert, I guess is what you're saying there. It's my responsibility to know the body. They're coming to me to take my class, trusting that I am aware of how the body works, and I'm aware of what it takes to build a class in the proper way. And it's not that I have people that are coming into my classes that are way smarter than I am, that are way more capable than I am, that have worked harder than I have, that are currently in very impressive jobs and careers. But yoga isn't their specialty, it's mine. And so if I needed accounting help, I would have someone in my classes that I could talk to.
Yeah.
If I needed help with if I was interested in going into a nursing career, there are several that I could talk to. They come to me for my expertise, so I take it as a personal responsibility to make sure I'm providing them with the healthiest class that I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's basically how I think of it.
Yep. And really quick, I wanted to kind of just put this into one kind of little statement.
Yes. Okay.
I'm sure we went over it, kind of just in bits and pieces.
Because we can talk for literal days on this. If we had enough water and peanuts, we could sit and talk for days on this. So how can we sum this up? I guess.
Yeah. So what is What is the difference between yoga versus just normal static stretching that someone might do after their workout?
Okay,
so
specifically as a recovery tool?
Yes,
Okay.
because like going through, I definitely have different feelings going through a yoga routine, moving from pose to pose, as opposed to just hitting a quad stretch for a couple of minutes followed by a glute stretch, and so on. So if you could just kind of like go into the differences between the two, just so people know.
And this is really hard to digest as far as a question goes. I'm going to try to keep it as easy and cut as possible. So I guess I'll run through this as if they were bullet points. Number one, the focus on meditation, on breathing, and overall mental and psychological relaxation is something that stretching doesn't necessarily place a lot of emphasis on. We'll say that's numero uno. That's the biggest thing that just regular stretching that we'll often see in our gym classes growing up does not take care of. And
Absolutely.
we cannot underestimate the incredible power of that. We can lay down in a meditation and just breathe and meditate and feel pain, discomfort, and tension leave our muscles. So it's an element that cannot be left behind. The next thing I would say is that alternation between the lengthening, relaxation, and activation is something that a lot of stretching doesn't really take care of well enough. When you're just stretching, when you're just bending over and touching your toes, you're completely missing the ways that we can work with our nervous system to really benefit the entire length of the muscle, every tissue involved, the fascia that surrounds the muscle. And so really I would say that that's number two is if let's say you're trying to work a little elements of yoga into your practice at home, try as much as you can to do a pretty direct switch between an active posture for that particular muscle group and a stretching posture. One of my favorites, and we'll go into a little bit of this later, I definitely want to, is if you want to do a quick one, is hold a 5-breath chair pose. And that's where we are in a seated position.
You can YouTube this. It's like most of these poses you can YouTube or Google and just find simple instructional videos on how to perform them.
Absolutely. Going from a 3 to 5 breath chair pose immediately into a forward fold with a rag doll. That's where you just let your body go limp and just sway back and forth. That's one of the greatest ones that I do, and I do that all the time. We have in chair pose an activation of the quads, we have an activation of the glutes, we have an activation overall of the posterior chain because you actually get a good good stress on the back there, and then you immediately go into that passive forward fold. If you do, my chair is leaning over to the side, I got to be careful with that. If you do 3 to 4 rounds of that, you will, without a doubt, see an increase in range of motion, an increase in flexibility, and a decrease in tension and pain. So those are the two top ones that I would say that separate yoga from stretching. And I'll leave it at that. To keep it very simple. Meditation, psychological and physical relaxation through breathing. And the focus on the PNF elements, the activation versus lengthening, that whole transition there that yoga gets and stretching fails to.
So like you kind of briefly just touched on this in the statement that you were just making, but like working it into general fitness, how would one go about doing that? Because I know you just mentioned you could do like 3 to 5 sets of certain poses. But what would be something that, or a good way that could be worked into somebody's like overall fitness who may or may not be an athlete at any level?
So that's a really good question, because we're all looking to be healthier, more whole, feel better on a regular basis. That's something we're all into, and we're also all trying to learn new things too. And so I always try to keep my mind wrapped around what is it like for a new student. So one of the things I would mention, and it's something we mentioned earlier, is repetition is one of the big keys to a moving meditation. And so you can look online, you can look on YouTube. There are plenty of sample classes you can take. A lot of them are very solid, good starting points. One of the first things I would do, though, is I would start with the absolute basics. I would start with your sun salutation A and your sun salutation B. For anyone who isn't aware, sun salutation A and B are two forms of the classic vinyasa style. In terms of yoga, vinyasa is still somewhat new within the last couple hundred years. If I'm correct, I could be wrong on that. New in the scale of yoga. New in the scale of ancient civilizations. That's what we're talking about here. But vinyasa is when you go to a normal class, especially in Western civilizations in the United States. A lot of times, if it's not a true vinyasa class, there are elements of vinyasa. Vinyasa is what I teach. It's my favorite style. But sun salutation A and sun salutation B involve many of the basic movements that other classes will be built off. And actually, one of the keys to teaching early on, I did this as a teacher myself, you're teaching off that foundation. Sun B is your foundation, and you pepper in some other poses. But you're starting with that because you know that front and back.
Well, I was gonna say that's exactly what I was doing for my yoga routine. I did yoga probably anywhere from 1 to 3 times during the week, especially when I was in season, just depending on how I was feeling. But I got my routine obviously from you. It was one of the ones that we did probably I think just before you started teaching here, and it's a very simple practice, but it's very effective. It was sun salutation A followed by sun salutation B, which involves a bunch of warrior poses, and then going from there,
a few more warriors,
a few more warriors, and then triangle going into crescent lunge, the reptile, and it didn't take very long, maybe 10-15 minutes. But I know that's at least what I was doing. So
right, that's absolutely it, and that's actually the class, the series that I taught to pass my yoga teacher training. So that one, I could do that in my sleep. You could keep me up for 72 hours and I could repeat that because I was very nervous prior to teaching there. As in I went to an incredible yoga studio down in the Florida Keys, Full Circle Wellness. They have now moved up into, I believe, the Satellite Key on the eastern coast. But anyway, great teachers down there, great school. For the end of our training, they invited anyone from the public to come in for free. So I had something like 20 people in my class, and this was the first class I had taught, period. And I was shaking in my boots. I was so nervous, but that was the class I taught. And so I feel like I should release a video at some point. Maybe I'll think about releasing a video.
He'll have his own YouTube videos.
Who knows? But for anyone who's interested in that particular class, it basically goes sun salutation A 3 times through, sun salutation B 3 times through. Then sun salutation B has warriors to them. You go into a warrior 1 as part of sun salutation B. So then on the third time of sun salutation B, you just open up to a warrior 2, and then you open into a triangle pose, and then from there you open into I believe we go reverse warrior.
Or exalted warrior.
Exalted warrior, or also known as peaceful warrior. Different interpretations there, and then we go from there into triangle, and then into our reptile. And reptile or lizard pose is one of my favorites.
It's fantastic.
And then from there to our pigeon pose. And then we step that foot all the way back to downward facing dog. We step the other leg forward into warrior 1, and then we open into warrior 2, and we start that warrior series over again. Finally, you end in malasana or yogic squats at the top of the mat, and from there you do a couple spinal twists, and then Shavasana, and that's the basic class right there. And so I would say if you're trying to get into yoga, sun salutation B, sun salutation A and B, and even to this day, sometimes when I just want to shut my mind off, I'll do a yoga practice that consists of 5 rounds of sun A, 5 rounds of sun B, a hip opener, and then I'm done. And that's all I do. And
that's all it takes.
It's actually very exhausting. There's a lot of movement and control in sun salutation. So that's where I'd say to start.
Yeah, absolutely. For any of those watching that might be a little bit discouraged almost, or not knowing if they really want to try yoga, what would you say to them? What would you say to those that are feeling maybe are in their or maybe have done yoga before and are just feeling discouraged with their practice
What's-
and how the
What's my sales tip here?
yeah,
What's,
yeah.
What,
like,
what, yeah.
what would you like?
Yeah.
What would you say to people to try and get them to at least give it a try? Because we know how important it is, and
Yep.
the benefits that it can have, and how life changing it in fact can be. Not just the stretching piece, but more so the mindfulness
Yeah.
and the meditation, the breathing.
Right.
I just think that that's very important, and I really want people to at least give it a shot. And
If they don't already,
yeah. So
yeah.
what would you say to those people that are watching? They're like almost on, they're like on the cusp.
Yeah.
But they just need one more thing to kind of push them over the edge.
So I'm gonna try to keep myself in check here, because there's a lot of things that could work into this topic that I get really I get really upset about. I get kind of angry about.
Yeah.
So I'll keep myself in check here. One of the first things I would say is nobody is perfect when it comes to yoga, when it comes to meditation, when it comes to diet, when it comes to exercise. Nobody's perfect. And this is the thing that I get angry about. I get very upset with my fellow yoga instructors, not at Mindful, but if you go on Instagram
As like
and
a
Facebook,
collective, yeah.
just the yoga instructor, some of these people make it seem as though they provide this image that they're the perfect human being, that they don't make any mistakes. I eat avocado with every meal, and I do yoga 4 times a day, and you should be like me. And that's a really harmful image to provide.
Yeah,
That's a
absolutely.
very harmful image.
Well, it's very discouraging.
It's
yeah.
extremely discouraging, and what it really paints a picture of is you can't be as good as me. You can't see, you're a failure for not doing these things, and that's a terrible, terrible mentality. And so when I teach, I always try to I try to come off as a real person. I try to sit in the front of the class and talk to my students like they're the real people they are. Ask them about their lives at home. When they talk about how they've been lazy with their yoga, or say, I haven't been in a while, I don't sit there and then say, I do it 3 times a day, because I don't.
Yeah.
I don't, because I'm not perfect. So I would say, don't get down on yourself if you feel like you can't make the sacrifice to do it every single day.
Yeah.
Yoga is the type of thing that even if you're doing it once a week, you're going to see a massive benefit. Then eventually you're going to enjoy it, because it really is a wholesome, healthy, and overall good feeling experience. So don't get down on yourself for not being the most regimented person in the world. The next thing I would say is don't feel as though you need to set your bar too high. This is something that I fall into from time to time, in that I'm lucky to teach the way I do, but I actually do struggle to teach. I teach all intermediate to advanced classes.
Yep.
I actually struggle to teach a lot of beginner classes because the way I teach is one that is really physically demanding. And it's something that I've been trying to work on, and I'm hoping to get better over time with. But one of the messages I'd like to portray here is that you don't need every class to be exhausting. You don't need every class to be incredibly challenging. You don't need every class to be an hour long.
Yeah.
Our studio classes are an hour and 15 minutes. Typically, my schedule is 10-minute centering at the beginning. That's a quick meditation to get yourself into that kind of like what you're talking about before your matches.
Yeah.
That's basically a centering right there. Sitting in silence, closing the eyes, and just breathing, getting into the mental aspect of it. And then I typically do around a 40 to 45-minute yoga routine, an asana. And then I end with anywhere between a 10-minute and a 15-minute shavasana. That's a long class. And when I'm at home, I don't do that whole class. My typical class, my typical home practice that I do, which I do about 5 times a week, is about 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's very simple and it's very easy. I don't exert myself that much. So that would be point number 2, is don't feel like you've got to set your bar super high. Yoga is about getting the best out of it for you. And it's like in economics, we have the 80-20 principle, right?
Yep.
It's like, what is going to be the most efficient use of your time? And if that means a 20-minute practice, that means a 20-minute practice.
Yeah.
So that's another thing
Absolutely.
I would say for someone who's discouraged.
Yep.
And so that's a couple points that I don't think a lot of people mention. Don't pay too much attention to what you see on social media as far as yoga goes. I'm a yoga instructor. I've been teaching for a while, and I get upset with it. This is when you look at the texts, the ancient yoga texts, what yoga is supposed to be all about. What is shown on Instagram is not it.
Mm-hmm.
What is shown on Instagram is not it. Yoga was, continuing just a quick sidebar here, yoga was something that, like Tai Chi, was created for meditation, but it was also created for the working person,
Yeah.
the working man and woman
Yep, absolutely.
that were leaving that exited their jobs, their hard manual labor throughout the day, and needed a way to recover and relax.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it started. It didn't start with eating acai berry chia bowls and doing a one-armed handstand.
Although those are delicious.
They are delicious.
Those are very cool.
And
But-
one-arm handstands
Yeah.
are incredibly
Incredibly
hard.
cool.
I wish I could do that,
Yeah.
but that's not how it started.
Yeah.
That's not the purpose of yoga.
Mhm.
And so I wish more people would emphasize that. It's
Yeah.
really important to remember. This is for the average person. That's
Yeah.
what it was intended for,
Yep.
not for the elite athletes and gymnasts of society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start wrapping this up, but before we do, feel free to chime in. But regards to meditation, I know that there are going to be some people watching this saying, you know what, I've tried it once, I can't get my
Yeah.
mind to relax.
Oh yeah, totally.
And
Yeah.
I get it. Like, I've been there. I'll go sometimes days, maybe even a couple of weeks, where I'll try and sit down and meditate, and I just can't get my mind to just kind of settle down and really, really, like, just empty and just become one with everything around me.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It doesn't have to be this perfect clarity when you're meditating. I think that, again, with the active and passive, it can be more of an active mind, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of go through your meditation and just be aware of your thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you're aware of your thoughts, I think that it's a very successful practice.
Oh, yeah.
If you go through your meditation and you're aware of all of the thoughts that are passing through your head, even if it's only 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you can really just be aware, and especially if those thoughts are negative, because if you have those negative thoughts and that negative self-talk, and you're actually starting to become aware of it, you can figure out how to change it. So you can go from those negative thoughts, interrupt that negative feedback loop that you're having, and then replace them with positive thoughts, and then really start to change your psychology.
Absolutely,
Really
yeah.
just, I guess, the way that you see the world. Because if you replace all the negative with the positive, that's all you're going to see. And I think that a lot of people aren't really aware necessarily of how many negative thoughts that we might have during the day. I'm not anything special. Most of my thoughts are negative. It's just
Yeah.
I try to be aware.
It really is a constant battle.
It really is. And
It really is.
I really just try to be aware of when I hear a negative thought pop into my head, and then just kind of push it out of the way.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Not trying to like stuff it down, just kind of let it pass and then replace it with something that's positive so I can really just kind of stay in that good mental mindset throughout the day that I started with that meditation.
Right.
So again, it doesn't have to be something where you're like some perfect guru of meditation. It can be, your mind's wandering, but just be aware of what you're thinking of.
And that's a really good point. And we can't deny, we can't fail to mention how hard meditation is.
It's very hard. It took me many, many years to at least get, I would say I'm like okay at it, but to get to a point where I can use it regularly to switch from that sympathetic to parasympathetic.
Yeah.
That took a long time to develop, and that's okay. As long as you just try to make progress with that every single time that you sit down to meditate, which hopefully could be every day around there. Even if it's
ideally,
5 minutes.
right?
But
that's a really important thing to mention is meditation is extremely hard to master, and one could argue that you can never really master meditation.
Yeah.
But what I'd love to do another video on that too, specifically talking about meditation, about self-talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that is something I'd like to revisit at some other time.
Yeah, for sure.
Continuing with that topic of how people can adopt some of these practices, how they can get started with yoga. What if they felt discouraged? I want to do some mentioning of meditation in that meditation is really fickle in that when you first try it, it's you're not going to feel like you are. You're not going to feel like you're meditating.
Yeah.
And your mind's just going to be out of control and bouncing around
Yeah.
like it almost always is.
And
for
sure.
You're going to be sitting there trying to silence your mind, because what we imagine as meditation is like that the master Shifu. So ran out of our second time there. So this is part 3 of the video. If you're still here by now, you're incredibly patient.
We
can't thank you enough.
Yeah, honestly.
Well, this one won't be as long for sure. So continuing on, meditation is when you try to get into meditation, especially for the first time, it's not about silencing your mind and trying really hard to.
Yeah.
It's about letting go of any attachment to thought. And if imagery helps, you can imagine yourself as like a rock in a river, and the water as the thoughts that flow by, and that typically we're a soft rock, we're like a sandstone that the water rushing by erodes at us and dictates our shape in a lot of ways. Where instead we can just, if we apply no emotional attachment to this, the water, the thoughts are just flowing around us and just flowing by. And sometimes, and they come in contact with us, and they just keep moving.
Well, I know that I was listening to a podcast with a guy named Jay Shetty, who was, or may in fact still be, a monk. I know he was for a few years, but he talked about how we are not our thoughts. That we are not the things that we think about. It's almost as if he gave the analogy, okay, so you own a home, and inside your house you have all of your friends, and then, I don't know, some guy that you might not be too fond of comes to your house and you let him inside, and everyone's kind of like about that person, but then eventually they leave. It's saying that person is not who you are.
I get that.
And it's not who your thoughts are, not who you are as a person. They're just your thoughts, and you have to let them glide by without a second thought. Just let it go.
Not holding any attachment.
Yeah, and I really liked that analogy. I liked your analogy as well. That's the first time I've heard that.
That's a good one.
That was a good one.
So the and so what I get, this is what I've felt in my personal experience getting into yoga for the first few times, and dealing with people in my classes, is when there will be one time, whether it's after yoga practice or a workout or just in your room, and it just happens to be the right day, and you're meditating, and the first time ever, you're going to get this feeling of, when was the last time I had a thought? I haven't had a thought in a while. And then you're pulled out of your meditation.
Exactly.
And you can't get back into it. It's like dreaming. And it's a little annoying because you're like, oh, I was almost there. Yoga, but meditation gets easier and easier every time you do it. And the time it takes for you to get into that state of relaxation and that state of stillness gets shorter and shorter each time. To the point where you meditate often, what does it take you, 5 minutes to get to a point of stillness? Same for me. When I meditate like alone in my room or in a yoga class, it takes me so little time to get into stillness and to not really be thinking of much and to have mental clarity. But then again, like you mentioned, there are times where that doesn't occur. So the key to meditation, the real potency of it comes through just the trying of it. Just keep attempting at it. You will get better.
Yep, absolutely.
There's no straight line path. There are no masters of it. There's nobody who's perfect at it. So just keep trying if you've been discouraged with meditation. I don't blame you. Like you said earlier, 5 minutes is excellent. Doing those breathing techniques is a great way to start.
It doesn't take more than 5 minutes usually.
No, it really doesn't. And to get a benefit, just to feel a little bit happier.
Absolutely. And to start wrapping this up, I just want to ask you, for everyone out there watching that might be interested in taking one of your classes, where can these guys find you? So social media, like Instagram, Facebook, how could they go about scheduling a class here?
Absolutely. My little plug here, right? But for social media, so again, my name is Joe Murphy. I mostly use Instagram at J Murphy 2400, Joe Murphy, and you can look me up. Mindful Yoga also has a page. on Instagram, and they post a lot of the decorations and flowers and all that cool stuff, as well as cool postures or
absolutely.
Scripts from the Bhagavad Gita and other yoga texts. So really nice page to follow. I can't be more complimentary of Heather for what she's done with this place and with her social media presence. As far as when I teach Friday evenings. I teach a class called Rock and Flow. I typically play a bit louder music. I try to really get creative with music. Anyone who knows me personally will be aware that music is something that I care deeply about. Yeah. I am extremely opinionated about.
I can attest to this.
So I often rant at Ike about this on a very, very regular basis. So I change up the music. It's very loud, typically a bit more rocky tone to it.
Yeah.
And then I teach Saturday mornings a class called Vinyasa 1 and 2, and that is your classic Vinyasa. I almost always have at least elements of Sun Salutation B and Sun Salutation A. I do a lot of Warrior Series. I'm very proud of that one because it's a very traditional Vinyasa class. And I feel like each time I do it, I get better. So those are my classes. If you're getting into, like I mentioned earlier, I teach intermediate to advanced style classes. The people who come to my classes are in incredible shape. I really am impressed. I made a post about this recently.
Yeah.
They wow me with how much I can throw at them. Like, I am sitting at home before class or the night before, thinking of what things I can do, what new postures, what new transitions to throw at these people, because I consider myself in pretty good shape. I do yoga all the time, and each class I am sweating. Every single class I am sweating. I am working hard. And these people, no matter what their age is, no matter what their profession is, I have a great group of people, and every time they finish the class and they go, that was really good. And I'm just amazed because they are so great. And so if you are getting into yoga or you want a bit more softer, slowed down class, we have really good teachers here. Yep. I have been blown away by every teacher that teaches here. By no means would I ever say that I am even close to the best teacher here. I just happen to teach my style.
Yep.
And so if you're looking for something, a nice intro, I can't recommend Dee enough. And I can't recommend Jess or Heather enough. We have some great new teachers like Marcella, and I cannot recommend them enough. They're great people, great teachers. I consistently go to their classes just to learn new things, and so it's a very, very nice community among that. So come to my classes if you wish, or message me on Instagram.
Is it through that Mindful app?
So then
schedule a class?
Scheduling class, you can just come in before class time. I believe we have our schedule on our website. That's something I should know as a teacher. But we use this service called MindBody Online, and it's a website, or you can get the mobile app. You can create an account, you can get your credit card on there, you can do all these things, you can sign up for classes, pay ahead of time, but also it includes our class schedule. And you should be able to find all that information on our website at mindfulyoga.com. I believe it's a Squarespace site. That's something more up Heather's alley. So, there's information about there. And again, if you have any questions, message me. I'd love to help you out.
So, final question for you to wrap things up. What is one thing that you hope that if people took one thing from this, what would you hope that it is?
Ooh, wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
What is one thing that they could take from this?
Or what's the most important thing that you think that they could apply to their own lives?
Okay, what can they apply to their own lives? That's a tough question because we when you're talking about yoga, when you're talking about athletics, stretching, there's a lot of different avenues you can take there. I guess one of the things I would say is, first, I have to break this up. First, give it a shot. If you haven't done yoga or you haven't done it in a while, or when you did it, you weren't too enthused about it, just try it again. Just give another, look up a video online and really, and don't half-ass it. Really go at it and try it as hard as you can. Give it the old college try, and and see what your opinions are, because it really can be an incredible experience, and you might not have gotten a great learning experience early on in your first experience with it. So give it a full shot, give it a full try. That's what I would say. And so then part B of my most important thing is, when you find that thing, when you find whether it's whichever part of this practice that really works for you, or whatever purpose you're using it for, whether it be the actual postures themselves, the physical stretching and manipulation of your muscles, whether it be the breathing techniques and focusing on just breathing cognitively and consciously, controlling your breath, this thing that happens automatically, like our heart rate, assuming control of that for a while can be a really important thing. So whether it's the actual postures, whether it's the breathing, or whether it's the meditation, moving, or stillness, whatever it may be, practice it regularly. Practice it regularly. Do it 5 minutes every day if you can. Do it 4 times a week. Do it 2 times a week. Whatever capacity you can adopt, whatever amount of yoga, whatever amount of breathing or meditation you can adopt, it is extremely helpful. I can't recommend it enough. It's helped me so much, as I've described. Yeah. Beyond just physical and recovery from injury, so many times where I've been on the brink of mental or emotional breakdowns, or I've used it a lot to control my anger, temper. A lot of us express emotional distress in different ways. And so to say how yoga has helped me is something that could take years to describe. But so find what it is that pulls you in. Find what it is that you really love about it, and find a way to work it into your schedule. I guess that's what I would say. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. That was episode 1. Really, really, really impressed by Joe's knowledge of all things yoga, recovery, meditation, and breathing. I would highly suggest that you come in and at least take 1 class and just talk to him afterwards. Ask him anything that you'd like. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to either him or myself about any of this. We'd love to chat and kind of go over things. And until next time.
And look forward to some more content from this guy. Yeah. You should have some coming up. So.
We'll see you later. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.